Those are the two teams that have expressed an interest in moving up to number 3.
I'm not making that move up from Washington. I'm taking Jaden Daniels. There's no way I'm giving Jaden.
This is pretty exciting, if you could go into a situation like that.
The huge NFL draft trade is about to happen. The question is, which pick does it involve and which team is going to be the team that jumps up? There is instances where it makes sense for a particular team to make a major move to trade up for a quarterback. And at the same time, there are multiple teams that could definitely trade back in this year's NFL draft. At the same time, there are teams that have no problem making a horrific mistake to move up to select a player that might not even really help their team so much. But as a result of having an incompetent front office, they probably would do it anyway. We've seen that happen in the past. So before we get to the content, we are on the grind to 900k subscribers. Make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Make sure you check us out on Snapchat for bonus content. And now that we got all that out of the way, over the past few days, we've been dominating on Prize Picks. We've been hitting an NBA, MLB, and we're on a hot streak, making a ton of money while having a lot of fun while doing it. I post my picks for free on Instagram, so you can literally just go copy my picks and just enjoy the game. And right now, Prize Picks will double your deposit match when you use my promo code FlightMike when you sign up. Or you can just click on the link in the description down below and sign up for Prize Picks. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Bold prediction here, but Caleb Williams is going to be selected with the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. He's already talking like he is a Chicago Bear.
The Bears was an 8-9 team last year, I believe, and 7-10. Sorry, and that's pretty good for a team that has the first pick. And they got a good defense. They got good players on offense, It's pretty exciting, if you could go into a situation like that.
So things get really exciting for the NFL draft once you get to the #2 overall pick. On our last video on this subject, we discussed some controversy in regards to Jaden Daniels being selected #2 overall by the Washington Commanders. But as it stands, it looks like the Washington Commanders made their decision with the #2 overall pick. Most likely it's going to be Jaden Daniels with the #2 overall pick, and the Commanders aren't going to be as willing to trade back from the #2 overall pick. And Peter Schrager went on the Pat McAfee show to attest this.
It sounds like Daniels 2 to the Commanders is a lot more likely now. That I'm going to put my name on something now. I think Jaden Daniels is going to go 2 to Washington.
And this seems to be correct because on top of this, Diana Russini tweeted out saying, teams trying to move up for a quarterback and calling Washington are being told that they are not moving. Washington's general manager, Adam Peters, has publicly stated the Commanders feel great about staying at #2 overall and picking their QB. If you take a look at the Commanders' entire offseason, it seems like this team was built for a dual threat QB of the likes of Jaden Daniels to succeed. They have a great wide receiver core. They went out and signed Austin Eckler in the offseason. They also signed Tyler Biadasz to attempt to shore up that offensive line a little bit more. They also signed Marcus Mariota, who's a dual threat quarterback that was a former Heisman Trophy winner that was also selected #2 overall in the NFL draft. On top of that, they hired Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator whose line of expertise is with dual threat QBs. So in my opinion, it's very likely that the Commanders go Jaden Daniels with the #2 overall pick. And that's despite Adam Schefter playing games with us, which we made a video on recently. But that isn't stopping other teams to attempt to move up to select Jaden Daniels. And theoretically, if any team gives up 3 first-round picks to move up to the #2 overall pick, you'd be foolish to not consider the offer. Typically, whenever you select a quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft, it's more likely than not that they're going to fail. I mean, look at the 2021 NFL draft, which was the last NFL draft that had a plethora of QB talent go in the first round. Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. Of all of those players, only one, the #1 overall pick, is still on the same team. And as exciting as this year's quarterback pool is, who's to say that the same thing isn't going to happen again? During the 2015 NFL draft, the top 2 picks were also Heisman Trophy winning QBs. QBs. Jameis Winston at number 1, Marcus Mariota at number 2. And famously, the Tennessee Titans rejected a huge Godfather trade offer from the Philadelphia Eagles to move up to the number 2 overall pick to select Marcus Mariota. In retrospect, that looks like a horrific mistake. So with that being said, Mel Kiper proposed a trade scenario where the Las Vegas Raiders trade up for Jaden Daniels.
Me, let's make that move. If they had the quarterback, they don't, right? So you're going to give up Jaden Daniels, who we think can be great, right? We have comps to Lamar Jackson and Randall Cunningham. And you're going to let the Raiders get them, who need them because they're in a division with Mahomes, right? And they got all those great quarterbacks like Josh Allen and all of them to deal with in the AFC. And if you told me, if somebody there today, is anybody a psychic? Is any psychics on board? If there's a psychic that can tell me that Michael Pratt from Tulane, okay, Michael Pratt, I think you probably are, Laura. Is Michael Pratt from Tulane? Is Keaton Slovis from BYU, right? Is somebody going to be Brock Purdy? If there's a Brock Purdy out there and I'm Washington, hey, sign me up. But I'm not good enough to predict. I don't think anybody's good enough to predict that. So despite the Hall, and I'm an advocate for the Hall, and I'm Monty Hall, and I love it, right? I'm not making that move from Washington. I'm taking Jaden Daniels. There's no way I'm giving Jaden to Antonio Pierce, who out of Arizona loves him. Jaden was too bad. This is the NFL. You don't pick where you go.
Now, at the same time, Mel Kiper isn't necessarily known for nailing his trade predictions. This guy also famously stated that Justin Fields could be moved for the number 8 overall pick in this year's NFL draft.
Place there, if you trade Justin Fields to Atlanta, you could get the 8th pick overall, so you could have 1, 8, and 9 field and be able to recoup a second-round pick by trading down with one of those 2 picks, either 8 or 9. So a lot of maneuverability for the Bears either way, Field. But if it's me, I'm taking Caleb Williams number 1 and trading Justin Fields.
That aside, Vinny Bonsignore actually said that general manager Tom Telesco said that they have a plan in place to be aggressive and move up in the NFL draft, obviously pending on certain circumstances unfolding and trading down as well. So what are those circumstances? My personal theory is that the Raiders are targeting Jaden Daniels, but as Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show even before all of this, here is the most likely scenario.
The 2 teams in my mind that I've been able to ascertain that have been the most active have been the Minnesota Vikings, number 1, and I think second, if we're going to quantify it, is the New York Giants. Now, whether they can get up to number 3 is a whole other issue.
Of all the teams that I believe make the most sense to trade up for any player at all whatsoever, it's the Minnesota Vikings. You have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson as your wide receivers. You went out and signed Aaron Jones as your halfback, but you no longer have Kirk Cousins to sling the rock. So you clearly need a quarterback this year, and moving forward with Sam Darnold is definitely not up for discussion. And according to Adam Schefter via the Pat McAfee show, things get really interesting at the number 3 overall pick, especially because the Minnesota Vikings aren't 100% locked in on only Jaden Daniels.
They're more likely to move the pick than the Commanders, but I still think the odds favor them staying where they are.
And this is where things get really interesting, because of all teams that I think are most willing to move on from their draft pick, the New England Patriots top the list. Nothing against the Patriots at all whatsoever. They have many more holes to fill on their team other than their quarterback. Last year, they had 3 players that were receivers or tight ends that finished in the bottom 10 of the NFL for separation. So it would make a lot of sense to thrust in another quarterback in a situation where he doesn't necessarily have any weapons to throw to. Wouldn't it be more wise to get as much draft capital as humanly possible to build up the other aspects of your team, so in a few years' time you could be in a scenario that the Washington Commanders or Chicago Bears are in? You want your quarterback to be able to throw to wide receivers like Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, or in the Commanders' case, Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin. I'm sure you get my point. So in the case of the New England Patriots, they seem to be content to stay at number 3 overall and select a quarterback. But obviously, that's not what they're hoping to achieve here. Now, Adam Schefter also laid out a scenario that would be the Patriots' dream scenario, and that's if the Washington Commanders happen to pass on Jaden Daniels.
Jaden Daniels is the favorite to be number 2. Obviously, he's not going 3. If he goes to 3, the price of 3 goes up a lot. But I think the Commanders, in the end, will opt for Daniels. That Vikings, who have expressed the most interest in coming up to number 3. The Giants have expressed some as well. The Patriots very likely are just sit where they're at and pick from number 3.
So this is where it gets interesting, because on top of the Minnesota Vikings, who have the most interest in coming up to number 3, who currently hold the number 11 and number 23 pick in this year's NFL draft, you also have the New York Giants, who are interested in moving up in this year's NFL draft. And the question is whether or not the New York Giants would want to move up for a brand new quarterback in this year's NFL NFL draft. Personally, I think the best option for the Giants is to stand pat and either select Malik Neighbors if he's available to you at the 6th overall pick and finally get Daniel Jones, a true number 1 wide receiver to throw the football to, or invest in offensive line once again, primarily because Evan Neal has not been working out for you guys. I personally think moving up and trying to get a brand new quarterback for the New York Giants would be a horrific mistake. I feel like there's other ways for this team to improve without giving up as many assets, and I feel like trading up for a brand new quarterback would be a marginal improvement at best. Daniel Jones is on a solid contract with the potential out in 2025. You might as well make the most of that situation. So my personal theory is if the Giants are moving up, my hope is they're moving up to try to take Marvin Harrison Jr., but at the same time, I don't think the gap between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors is so significant to the point where you need to consider trading up in the NFL draft, although I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the safer prospect. I feel like the parallel that could be drawn here is similar to when Julio Jones and AJ Green were coming out of college for the NFL draft. There's not too much of a gap between these two wide receivers. Both are going to be amazing in the NFL, at least from my perspective, and both could help the New York Giants tremendously, which means the most significant trade that could happen is with the New England Patriots. And Peter Schrager actually discussed this even further on the Pat McAfee show.
I think May does go third. And the two teams that I've been hearing the most about being May teams in the last 48 hours, the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants.
Now, I will admit, it's very difficult to evaluate quarterback talent. Drake May had a down year this past year. JJ McCarthy won the national championship this year. It's very difficult to determine who's going to be better than who. But I think at the very minimum, JJ McCarthy might be a little bit more of a project than Drake May. And I don't think that's too bold of a take to suggest. I've seen quarterback prospects like McCarthy before, relatively young for their age, needing to sit down for a year or two, but with the potential to be the best prospect in this entire NFL draft. If the New England Patriots want to opt for that route, if they want to draft JJ McCarthy and have him sit for a year, and if they're not completely sold on Drake May at the number 3 overall pick, it does make sense to trade that pick to a team like the Minnesota Vikings, which I believe are probably the prime candidate to move up to the number 3 overall pick to select their quarterback of the foreseeable future. In the case of the Vikings, I feel like the right quarterback could instantly make them contenders, whereas the wrong quarterback can set them back for years to come and completely close their Super Bowl window shut. And in this instance, the quarterback that makes the most sense for the Minnesota Vikings system would probably be Drake May. We're going to keep an eye out for any crazy trades that occur, but in addition to this, it's important to note that Peter Schrager also says that this isn't a question of a pick happening within the top 3 of the NFL draft. Rather, it's a question of a trade happening within the top 6 of the NFL draft.
And I've been on the phones nonstop for the last 48 hours, including this morning. And I'm not talking just the top 4. I think the top 6, including Penix and Nix, all in the first half.
Let me know in the comment section down below which team is the most likely to trade up for their quarterback. Which team would make no sense at all to trade up for a quarterback, but they could potentially do it. I think if the Raiders want a quarterback, they should stand pat and maybe take a flyer on Michael Penix. I feel like the New York Giants shouldn't draft a quarterback at all and focus on other aspects of their team, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.